And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with the Game Boy Geek.
Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we are going to be going to some islands, actually archipelagos. We're going to be basically back into late 1400s all the way to the late 1700s is where this game takes place. And we're going to be finding new pieces of land. We're going to be colonizing it. We're going to be dealing with people that already are part of that land that aren't part of our little colony. We're going to be dealing with people revolting and trying to overthrow our new population. We're going to be trying to be harvesting goods. We're going to be trying to building ships and cathedrals and markets and ports and importing and domestic markets and all this cool stuff, all with some negotiation, some interesting things here. We're talking about Archipelago. This is brought to us by Asmodee in the US. 2 to 5 players, plays anywhere between 30 and 240 minutes, the box says, depending, because there's short, medium, and long games that you can set up at the beginning. There's a lot to this game. I'm not going to be able to show you everything. I'll try to give you a decent enough detail that you know how it's played, but trying to keep it somewhat short. So let's take a look. I'll show you how it's played. I'll see you on the other side. At the beginning of the game, after what they call turn 0, things are sort of getting started. Everyone gets to get a card that has a secret objective and a secret scoring. Now you can play a short, medium, or long game. There's 10 of each of these cards in each of these things. This is like a 30-minute to a 2-hour. This is 60 minutes to 3 hours, and this is 90 minutes to 4 hours. So let's say we do the medium. One person might get one of these cards here. Now the top half of this is the game end condition. Each of these will have a secret game end condition, which triggers the end of the game, and then a secret scoring condition. So here, this basically would say, hey, the population of the island, if I'm playing with 4 players, if there's 35 meeples on the island, that would cause an end game condition. And when that game ended, anyone that has ports and markets, a combined of those, whoever has the most that controls them would get 3 points, and then 2 points for second place and 1 point for the first place. This is the majority of how the scoring will happen. It's through secret agendas and secret ending and things like that. So everyone would get one of those, so you're not quite sure what everybody else has, but you can try to deduce it by their playing. There's also one known goal out there, which in this case it's money. Whoever has the most money at the end will get 4, 3, and 2 points, and depending on what place you go on. So this is public knowledge. All those other cards I showed you are private knowledge. Now I mentioned it's semi-cooperative. There is a way for everybody to lose the game. This is one of the player tracking boards which tracks white is the population and black is the rebels that are on the island. If the rebels ever pass the amount of population that's on the island, the game ends immediately and everyone loses, except if one person has a secret agenda that allows them to be the traitor. We'll talk about that later. Everyone gets a handy dandy screen with their color to shield their money and their components and their resources from the other players. And then on the back side it has what building costs are, it has the order of play, and it has certain things that people will go there. We're going to go through one round and show you what this game's like. The first phase is disengagement. I'm not going to go over that. It's just basically resetting the board for a new turn. The second phase is order of play. This is the turn order from last turn. Everybody will then take, if they want, a certain amount of money and put it in their hand. At the same time, once everyone's ready, you reveal. You can bid nothing. Everything you bid, you lose, whether you win or lose the bid. So you want to bid cautiously. The person who has the most is going to be able to set the turn order of everybody. He might want to be first. He might not want to be, depending on things. This also opens up negotiations, because let's say blue won. Blue's going to go, I'm going to go first. Okay, who wants to be second, third, or fourth? Do you want to be really bad? Let's negotiate. There's a lot of negotiations in this game. And you could negotiate for anything. You could negotiate for resources or money, or hey, do me a favor here. Hey, I did you a favor earlier. Negotiation is a big part of this phase in this game right here. And then once turn order is gone, we go to the next phase, which is the population effect. Now there's 4 boards here. I showed you this population board earlier in detail. There's a domestic market board, a foreign market board, a surplus worker board, and the population. Let's look at each of these individually. This shows the 6 resources that the island is producing domestically. We have fish, exotic fruit, cattle, stone, wood, and iron. We look at these. If any of these trigger any one of these things to happen, we do it. So for instance, this adds the surplus workers by 1, and it's the only thing on this board that actually will add anything. In this case, we would go to the surplus marker board and put it up by 1. These are essentially our workers these are people that are part of the island, but they're not part of one of our colonies. They're just there as extra added workers. We would then look at the foreign market or the export market and see if any of these things trigger, and there aren't anything on any of the lines that would trigger anybody, so we'd go to the next board. Now here we would look to see where the population is. If it was on this line, we would then move the surplus workers up by 1. If it was on this line, we would put the rebels up by 1. And now we go up to the 4th board. And we look at the 4th board, but because this moved up this round, now we have to update up by 1 rebel. And you can see as the more workers that are not being used and just hanging around, the more of them turn into rebels. So the rebels would go up by 1, and you could see how all these boards and all the economies sort of string together into one glamorous little thing here. And again, if this thing passes that, game's over and we all lose, unless you're the trader. The next is the balance of the archipelago phase. We look at this card. If either of these are yellow or orangish, like this one, we have a crisis on our hands. The top half of the card is the market, the domestic market. The bottom half is the export or the foreign market. What this tells us is that there's going to be a crisis for pineapples or exotic fruit, and we're going to lay every meeple on its back. They essentially are upset, and they're sort of temporarily rebels. And what we have to do is come up with for every one exotic fruit we come up with, we can stand up 6 people. So we have 13 people laying on their backs now. Everyone went down. Everyone except if someone is controlling a church, which we'll talk about building churches later. If someone controls a church, they don't have to go down, and anybody in their region doesn't have to go down because they're good against the crisis. Now here as well, this person owns a church, which is why they're there. Now again, negotiation. This blue guy could pay off or negotiate with the purple person to say, hey look, you're on a church, you could leave me standing up, let's make up a deal. Again, negotiation would happen there, but we've got 13 people laying down. So starting with the first player, which is blue, they get to try to resolve this conflict. Now again, for every pineapple given back to the bank, they can stand up 6 people. There's one on the domestic market, so most likely he's going to take this one off the domestic market, put it back in the bank, and he's going to be able to stand up 6 people for the card, 6 people. So the blue person will go, okay, here's 1, 2, 3. I'm going to stand up 3 of my own guys. I have 3 left. Well, hey, I'm not going to work with the purple guy. He just didn't let me stay standing because of the churches, so I'm going to leave him out to dry. Leave those guys there. Maybe I negotiate with red. 1, 2, 3 to pay a favor back later. There's some negotiation going on, and he stood up 3. So now we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys still standing. The purple guy doesn't have any wild resources and doesn't have any pineapple to give up, so he has to basically pass. It goes to yellow's turn, and yellow has one behind his screen that he wants to give up. He has a pineapple. He puts it in there. So he's going to stand up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and he left 1 purple guy laying there. So there's 1 left staying down. So now purple's negotiating with red to say, hey man, you got a pineapple you can add? I'll give you some, they work out a deal. Well, ends up they don't have anything, so there's 1 left purple worker staying down. This does 2 things. 1, he can't be used this round in the action phase. And 2, the rebels go up by 1 for every person that's still laying down at the end of this crisis. Again, if it passes, game's over. So you can see how it's very semi-cooperative. People have to work together to not lose the game. Now, if this was not red background, if it was orange background like this, after that, we would immediately have to go for an export crisis. The top is always domestic, the bottom's always export, and we would have to come up with 2 cattle collectively. Doing the same thing that we just did, but instead of using the domestic market board, we'd be using the export market board. Now, if we could solve this, that's fine. For every cube that's not given, we put the rebel marker up for 1 for every cube that we couldn't do. But this is red, we'll get to those later. This would not be resolved now. These happen a little bit later in a different phase. Now in the action phase, you start with 3 discs, but as people explore the island, you'll get up to 5 discs once the island's explored to a certain level. I'm not going to go over all the actions in total detail here. I'm just going to kind of fly through the different actions you can take. Essentially, you're going to be playing an action disc. You are going to also possibly either play a character card, which we'll talk about later, and then use a marker to port here. So some of these actions you are limited to spaces. So the ones that have these colored discs, anybody can go to these colors, or you can go to a color of your chip. So some of these actions are limited, the other ones are sort of unlimited. So let's just fly through these. All of these are the different resources in the game, and when you go there for an action, you'll be able to harvest a resource, assuming you have a person on a tile that has that resource. You can increase your population by reproducing or hiring those extra workers. You can raise money by taxing, and you get a certain amount of money depending on how many people and how many buildings you control and things like that, but it makes the rebels go up. You can attempt to explore, which is a push your luck block element. You may or may not be able to, depending on what tiles you draw. You can migrate, which will allow you to move people in boats to different parts of the islands, the archipelagos. You can do let's see, build, and building things. You can build, towns, markets, ports, and churches, and those things allow you to do some trading on the domestic market or the port market and things like that. You can build ships as well, which allow you to kind of migrate and maybe, hold ports and such. This, you can also do a transaction, which you can do, you could buy or sell on the domestic export market. And then these ones are not used with action, so you might place an action here, but then also you place $1 on one of these two, which is the market or the port. Assuming you have built and control a market or port, you can do domestic trades or export trades. You actually get to do 2 of those. Similar to the transaction, but you have to be controlling it. It doesn't cost an action disc, it just costs $1. And you get to do 2 trades, where here you just get to do 1. So those are the different actions that you can do. Then the last phase of the round is the evolution card. So what you have to do is either you purchase a card or you turn a card, and then after that you turn one more card, and it has to be different from the one you turned before. Some of these, it's very interesting. So this shows that starting prices 3, 2, 6. And as they get turned, some of them go up and some of them go down. 3 would turn to now it's $4, to then it's $6, to then it's gone and it would go away. Where this one goes 6, 4, 3, gone. So some of them go more expensive, some of them go cheaper. So in this case, maybe I just turn 2 of them, or I could buy one. Now when you buy them, you just take it and you get the card, or you turn. They do certain things, like this allows you to get an extra wood, essentially, when you go to each wood spot. Some of these with the rainbows allow other people to activate them. So even though I bought it, you can only use it once per turn. Someone else might activate this on the next action phase, and I won't be able to use it. And it costs $1 to use it. So the rainbow ones can be activated by other people. And then there's some other things over here. So some of them are actually characters that give you special abilities. Like, for example, during exploration, you may perform a second exploration tile after the first one. Or they might be actual things where this is immigration. And so for every port that's controlled there, or every port that's on the board, you'd minus the surplus workers. Then we have wonders. These are pretty hard to get, but like, for example, if you had 2 action discs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stone, you could build this. It'd get you 2 points at the end of the game. But it would increase the rebels by 2. So there's certain cards that you can do there, and as you turn them. Now, if someone turns 1 for the last time and it gets gone, a new card will come out at that point. And then, if the card that comes up is red, we talked about this being red earlier, you have to stop and have an emergency crisis again. You'd lay everybody on your backs again, and you'd have to spend 1 stone. Would get 6 people back. So there's emergencies coming, and if another card gets bought, you could have, if the next card was an emergency, you could have another emergency. And that goes through till everyone's done their evolution actions, and that ends pretty much 1 round through the game. Now again, the end game happens when one of the, in this case we have a 4-player game, so each person would have one of these cards secret, and end game and then scoring. Once the game would end, they'd flip over the card and show that it ended, and then we'd count the scoring. As before I said, this is like in 4 players, 35 population, and then the person who had the most ports and towns markets controlled would get 3, 2, and 1 points effectively. We would also add the trend, which was the open goal, and we'd count that up, and some people have points from cards they bought. Whoever has the most points at the end is the winner. Well, there's Archipelago. Well, I gotta say, I very much enjoy this game. Borderline love this game. The reason being is it's kind of like, it sits in that area that I really love, which is like hybrid between a European or Euro style game, which is all about efficiency and kind of playing little solo games, and versus the interaction and negotiation of sort of the American or Ameritrash games, as they're affectionately called. And it's kind of in the middle here. And I like that. I love anytime you can have negotiation and keeping promises or not and trading and stuff. I always like that in games. This has a good amount of that, and I like how it's open. You can pretty much trade anything. Now, granted, you're doing it in certain aspects of the game, in certain phases, but it's completely open, and I like that. You're not just trading this for that. You can come up with any deal you want to think of, and I love that open negotiation in this. I really love how this game was designed, where the economy of this game, the way that the domestic market works and buying and selling, and the export market, and how they all tie together to, if it's too flooded, then thematically there's going to be too many indigenous workers. If there's too many of those, then it increases the revolt population, the rebels. And if the rebels get more than the populations, then the game's over for everybody. The semi-cooperative aspect to this is excellent. I love it. I want to start playing more semi-cooperative games because I think they're amazing. This does a great job of making you work together, but still looking after your own interests. gosh, those cards you get at the beginning, the secret end game and the secret scoring conditions really make this game great because you're constantly watching what other people are doing, and then there's a little paranoia there. Okay, is he getting a lot of fish because that's one of his conditions to end the game, or okay, he's buying a lot of character cards. Is that his end game goal, or is that the end game condition? You might actually think it's his goal and then go for it and by accident trigger the end game when you're not ready for it. There's just a lot there, a lot to read into, a lot of reading people. But then when you strip that down, you look at the actual mechanics of the game and the migrating and the repopulating and the building and the controlling. It's very Euro-like, and I actually love that aspect of it too. So I really like this game. It is quite a polarizing game. I've found that people pretty much either really, really like this game and love it, or they really dislike it. It just rubs people either the right way or the wrong way. And I think that's good, because usually a game's supposed to be designed for a specific audience, and if that audience loves it, that's good. So this might be one that you want to try before you buy, but it's definitely one that I love. I like how you can play the short, the medium, or the long game. You're talking like 90 minutes to 2 hours to 2 hours and a half to longer than that with the longer game. I like how you can scale it that way. I personally like the medium game the best. The short felt a little too short. The long, forget about it. Medium just felt just about right. And I just really, really love this game. Archipelago.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.